Hi, welcome back to CST 120, and this is the second video in using files. So as I said at the end of the first video, for this video I'm going to be talking about wildcards. So let me just do another dir command to get a list of the files without the 8.3 column there, so we can see all of the file names. Alright, now what wildcards are, there are two characters, a question mark and an asterisk, that allow you to substitute those characters instead of the characters that actually are being used in a file name or a directory name, in case you want to be able to reference more than one file and they only differ by a few characters. Now, I've got several files here that start out with Miller mark, and some of them get a little bit more specific. For instance, letter and word exam get more specific with multiple files. So what I'm going to do for the first demonstration, we're going to talk about the question mark wildcard character. Now, the question mark wildcard character is meant to take the place of only one character. So you'll notice here I've got three files here, Miller mark word exam space V, and they only differ after the V. They're all .docx files, but one of the files has two characters here. So watch what happens when I use the question mark to try to display just those files. So I'm going to use the dir command, Miller underscore mark, and then I'm going to use the tab key to have it fill in the rest of the file names for me. So letter, word, there we go. So remember, we still need, even with wildcard characters, you still need the space character sometimes. And when I talk about the asterisk character, you'll see what I mean then. But for now, I'm just talking about the question mark. So what I'm going to do is, for this, I'm going to substitute one question mark, and that's meant to tell any of the commands that replace that question mark with one character as long as the rest of the file name matches. So now when I do dir, I get the v2 file and I get the v3 file, but I don't get the v10 file, because remember, the question mark only replaces one character. Now, if I've got this kind of situation where most of the file name is the same and it only differs by, say, 2 or 3 characters, I can use the question mark to make sure I can replace 2 or 3 characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recall that dir command, and this time I'm going to have 2 question marks, so that now it's saying replace those question mark with characters at that point, and then display the results based on substituting actual values for those question marks. So now when I do this, I now get all of the characters. So one of the things that you may not realize is, even though I had 2 question marks there, it got me back everything, as long as the question marks satisfy all of as long as the file names satisfy the results of the question marks. Now, what would happen if, for instance, I use the question mark in multiple places? Well, not a lot. The question mark will simply be replaced by the appropriate character, again, as long as the rest of the file name matches. So let's see. I don't have a good example, so I'm simply going to replace the space with a question mark so that you can see what happens. Uh, so let's recall the command. So basically in this instance, what I'd be doing here is I can't remember if I had a space there or I had some other character, but I know the rest of it is Miller Mark Word Exam, and it has a couple of characters after the V, and it's a .docx file. So now when I use this command, I still get the same commands back. So, but I also wanted to show you that you can use wildcards multiple times, and you can use them anywhere in a file. Now, it can get really tedious using multiple question marks, so that's where the asterisk comes in play. The asterisk wildcard says replace any number of characters, not just one, not just two, but any number of characters as long as the rest of the file name matches. So let me just do dir by itself. And you notice I have several files that start out with Miller Mark. Well, let's say I want to get all the files that start out with Miller. So I can use the dir command again, type Miller, and I don't need anything else. I can just say asterisk. And it gets me everything after Miller, including the file extensions. And again, it doesn't matter how long the file name is. It will match Miller and then just return all the other files that have anything after MILLER. The same holds true for any of the other files that are in here. Even if the file differs after the first character. So for instance, I could get, and oddly enough, pretty much everything here. Oh, I have P. So let's say I want to display just the files that start with P. The letter P is in Paul. So I want to display, in this case, print admin scripts list and putty reg settings. So what I can do is simply do dir P asterisk. And it gets me all the files that start with P. So you don't have to have a lot of characters to display everything. Now, you can also combine the question mark and the asterisk. So, what do I have here? Let me go and just do dir. And let's see, do I have anything? I know I have some Excel spreadsheets. Let's see. See if I can figure out a good example here. Well, let's say that I want to make sure, what I'm going to do now though, is I'm going to do a quick change here, is I'm going to use a command we haven't used yet called copy. And what that does is what it sounds like. It makes a copy of a file so you can give it a new file name and then make changes to the copy of the file. I am going to make a copy of this Excel chart, XLSX, and I'm going to give it my name in here. So let me do that. Copy. I would type N and then use tab completion. There we go. And I'm going to change the name to, let's see, do I want to bother with spaces? No, I'm going to change this so it doesn't have a space in it. Miller underscore Mark underscore Excel, oops, Excel with a C, v1.xlsx. Now when you're changing the name to a different file name using the command line, you have to remember to include the file extension. Now, what happens if you forget? Well, in the graphics system, it's not going to know what program created the file because there's no file extension. So you'll have to go through right-clicking and selecting the application to use to open up that particular file. Now the file will still get opened up, and but what you should then do is save it with the correct file extension. But here, I think this is what this is going to give me is going to work. So let me now show you just dir Miller asterisk. All right. Now, in this case, with the asterisk, it got me everything. What I want to do is I want to get just the files that have a V and one character after the V, and I want to make sure I get all the different files. So I have to account for searching for the file extension. Well, actually, in this case, it should get me all of the files, regardless of the file extension. So let me do this way. So we want to do dir. Now here, let me backspace, make a little space here. dir Miller asterisk V question mark. And no, I'm sorry. I was thinking wrong. What I do have to account for the file extension. So just typing a question mark there, it would give me whatever it could find that started out Miller, had anything between Miller and V, and then one character, and then anything else wouldn't match because I didn't tell it to search for anything else. So I want one character there, followed by any type of document. So what I've done is I've now, with the first asterisk, I said anything between Miller and V. One character follows V, then the file extension follows. And with the asterisk, I'm saying search for any file extension. Now I could use 3 or 4 question marks for this last asterisk like this, but remember, and I'll go 4. But remember, earlier I said for file extensions can be longer than 3 or 4 characters. For instance, in the Microsoft Office suite is a program called Access. And when Access creates its files, it uses a 5-character file extension. So you don't really want to guess on the number of characters you have to substitute. Not when you have a wildcard character that will substitute any number of characters. So here we go. Let's see what I get back. So I get back Excel V1 because there's only one character there. I get back the Word Exam V2 because it had the asterisk. Everything here satisfies the asterisk, first asterisk, and then I get the XLSX and .docx file extensions, which satisfies the last asterisk right here. Now, let's say you want to get only the Excel files. Well, you know, or eventually you'll remember that Excel files have a file extension of I'll do it down here, sorry, XLSX. So, if you want just the Excel files, you type, in this case, dir Now remember, I do want to remind you, I'm using the dir command for examples here, but this does not work only with the dir command. You can pretty much, well, I shouldn't say pretty much. There are a lot of commands that work with file names, and you can use wildcards with all those other commands as well. It's just that right now I'm using dir to demonstrate it's a little bit easier and more straightforward. So I do not want to give you the impression that these wildcards only work with the dir. They do not only work with the dir command. Alright, that said, let's go with getting just the Excel files. So dir space asterisk dot xlsx. Alright, so the first, well not the first, but the asterisk says find any file name with any number of characters before the period. And then display, and then make sure they only have an extension of xlsx. So now when I do that, I get back only the xlsx files, Miller Mark Excel v1, NPC Excel chart, and orders. So that's how you can filter down a list of items you get back using a command, whether it's dir or some other command. Okay, so that gets us through wildcards. So now what I'm going to talk about is attributes for files. Now, an attribute for a file defines not what type of file it is, but how the system should treat it. For instance, is it a system file needed for the operating system? Is it a hidden file? Is it a read-only file? Or let's say it has an attribute of archive, meaning the file was changed and should be backed up. So on page, or I should say slide 8, I talk about the different types of attributes you might encounter. And I should point out I have a slight mistake on slide 8 where I say for the sparse file, it's that the wording is clumsy. It says a file where most of the disk space is taken up by zeros, and NTFS reduces the amount of disk space used. What that means is that for whatever reason, a lot of the disk space is unused by that file, or for some peculiar reason, it may be a graphics file or something, a lot of the data is just zeros. So what ends up happening is the NTFS file system, which all of the modern Windows file systems use, or I'm sorry, all of the modern Windows operating systems use the NTFS file system, handles that by actually keeping track of where the zeros should be in the file and actually reduces the amount of space a file is taking so that it's not actually storing all of those zeros literally and taking up all that disk space. You may not run into that type of file very often. It, like I said, it's a very specialized file. It could be a graphics file that happens to have a lot of zeros in it because of a lot of space at that point in the file. Doesn't have any color codes or anything, so it needed to store something there. But you'll see on slide 8, I believe that's pretty much every type of file you might encounter. We're just going to deal with some of the more common things you might run into. Now, I noticed that I moved the attrib command to slide 10, and I really should have put the attrib command immediately after talking about attributes. I'm not sure why I did that. Maybe it had something to do with the way I needed to format the slides. I'm not sure. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to use the attrib command to show you what some of the attributes are that are already on files in my documents directory. And you can type the attrib command with no other switches or nothing else, and it'll just simply display every file and the attributes that those files have. And so, without you doing anything, I have some files in here. Pretty much everything's archived. Now I should comment on the archive attribute. That's really not used that much anymore. Most modern backup systems do not bother doing that. They use their own database to keep track of what files need to be backed up. So the archive attribute's a bit of a leftover. I believe that Microsoft's own backup systems use that archive attribute, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Alright, besides the archive attribute, if you look, you also have H for the hidden attribute. So a file out there called default.rdp is hidden currently. RDP has to do with remote data access by Microsoft. Not that Microsoft is remotely accessing your computer, but there's a program that you use, mainly system administrators use, that you can connect from your home computer to a remote computer if you need to check on something. And the program uses the RDP file extension, and it's got the default settings hidden so the file doesn't get accidentally deleted. Now, there's also a desktop.ini file that's considered a system file. Here's the S and the H, and it's also hidden. Again, that contains information, settings information about the desktop. For instance, where icons are located and other settings you might have turned on for the desktop. And it's considered a system file. So sometimes during deletions, system files will not get deleted even if you try to delete them. And it's hidden so you don't accidentally try to delete it either. Now, using the hidden attribute only gives you a little bit security. Really, it's there so that you don't accidentally delete something, because even though these files don't show up with a regular dir command, you can still display them and find them. So when you're troubleshooting, one of the things you would do is look for hidden files using the attrib command or the dir command. And when I get to actually talking about the dir command, it has a switch that allows you to select for and filter for files that are hidden. All right. Now, using the attrib command, you can actually make your own files hidden, or you can change attributes. So for instance, if I wanted to say that I didn't want the test.1 file to be backed up, assuming the backup software looked at the archive attribute, I could use the attrib command. And when you want to remove an attribute, you use the minus sign, and then you use the letter of what attribute you want to remove. So if I use A, and again, even though it shows the attributes there in uppercase letters, you don't have to specify them that way. And then I'll just use the file name. So test.1. All right. So what I've said is I want to remove the attribute A from the file test.1. So I use the attrib command again. There it is. The A attribute's no longer set for test.1. Now let's say that I want to hide a file because, and again, this isn't very good security, but I'm doing it because I don't want to accidentally delete the file. So that means I need to add an attribute. So let's say I want to add the H attribute to test.1. So for whatever reason, I want to make sure it's hidden and I don't accidentally delete it. So to add an attribute, you use the plus sign, and then you specify the letter of the attribute. In this case, it's H. And so I just use that command, and if I go back and use attrib, there, the H is added to test.1. And when I use the dir command, test.1 no longer shows up in the listing without me having to specify an additional switch to the dir command. All right. Now, let me look at test file. I want to double check something. So I'm going to use a command called type, which we'll talk. I'm going to go ahead and talk about this command now because there's not a lot to the command. What type does is it displays the contents of a file, and you should only use this on text files, because if you try to use it for other files like graphics or Word documents, the formatting codes inside those documents could cause problems for your display. And I've had it where I accidentally typed in the wrong file name, got a graphics file, and my whole screen froze up and I had to reboot my computer. Alright, so let's just do type test file.txt. Okay, not a lot there, just the date. So that's what type does for you. Let's see. I was actually hoping that I had created a file that had some text in it that I'm going to be talking about on slide 9. All right. Let's see. Only 17 characters. Sorry about that. I thought I had created the file, and I had not created the file after all. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is just talk about something called ASCII. And I'm going to type the name here all in uppercase, not because you have to refer to it all in uppercase, but it stands out. Right, on slide 9, I'm talking about what ASCII is a scheme for how to arrange all the letters in the file names when you need to sort them or use them for other purposes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Firefox again. And what we're going to do is this time I'm going to go to ASCIIcode.com. www, let me take caps off, .ascii-code.com. And this is listed on slide 9 at the top of slide 9. So when you're looking at the ASCII code, it has a particular binary number and code for every single character that the operating system might encounter. And I'm going to scroll by the special communication codes so that I can get to the characters. So space has a code, exclamation point, and what I want to point out is if you look, all of these special characters like a slash and a period appear before numbers, and then numbers appear before some other characters, and then you have uppercase characters. And if you keep scrolling, then you'll see that lowercase characters are listed separately after uppercase characters. So when you do sorts, technically uppercase characters come before lowercase characters, and numbers will come before either the uppercase or lowercase characters. And I do point that out in the example I use in slide 9, where I show you a list and then show you what it would look like after it's sorted. Now, even though in the ASCII coding sequence, uppercase characters come before lowercase characters. Sort routines ignore that. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that was, possibly because when you're using normal English, you tend to think of as lowercase and uppercase being equivalent. So that's what the sort routines do, is they treat uppercase letters and lowercase letters as being the same. So in my example on slide 9, it leaves the lowercase, actually the mixed upper and lowercase Mark Miller in the same spot it was before after the sort. Now, if I had put the uppercase Mark Miller characters above the mixed case letters for Mark Miller, then that's where it would also have left the uppercase above the lowercase Mark Miller. Now you also notice that there's a Mark Miller with the number 1 in it. That's because when sorts occur, they occur comparing the first character to the first character and everything, the second character to the second character and everything, third to third, and so on. So since the number 1 in the ASCII coding sequence occurs before any other character, the one that's in the Mark Miller gets sorted before any other Mark Millers that have just letters in the name. So, but this ASCII coding sequence is where it determines how to sort things. So again, if a sentence in a text file, or any file for that matter, starts with like a pound sign, then that would get sorted first before anything that started with a number, like 0 or 1. So here's the pound sign. So, and this doesn't hold only true for just text files. So when you're sorting things in Word documents, or you're sorting things in an Excel spreadsheet, this is the coding sequence it uses to determine how things will get sorted. Alright, now just to briefly talk a little bit more about the attrib command. On slide 10, I do talk about a few other attributes, but one of the things I do want to point out is, remember earlier with wildcards, I was talking about how you can use wildcards with any command. So on slide 10, I show that I could use the H attribute and add that to anything that started with .txt. So let me do that just to demonstrate. So I could, actually let me do a combination here. So I could do attrib plus H, oops, let's remember the H, Miller, sorry, asterisk V question mark dot asterisk. So now what's going to happen, it's going to add the H attribute to every file that satisfies that it starts with Miller, has any number of characters until you get to a V, has only one character after the V, then there's a dot, and then any file extension. So when I do that, and I do dir, there's a lot of files missing here. So the v2 and v3 .docx files are missing. The xlsx file is missing. And when I type in the attrib command, you can see that an H was added to all of those files. So here's xlsx. So again, hiding the files is very little security. You can find the files very quickly and easily, even though they're hidden. So what I want to do now, though, is I want to bring those files all back. So I'll now take off the H attribute, by using the minus sign. And then I'm going to bring back my test.1 file as well. So we'll do a trib -h test.1. And there, now when I do dir, everything's back. Okay, now there are more switches available for a trib. So if you do help a trib, there are more things you can specify that I'm not going to go through. If you looked at any of those books that I listed as optional reading, things for you to look at, those books have tons of information in them. So again, I'm not sure if I emphasized it in the first part 1 video, but even in this class, in 7.5 weeks, we're going over the basics, believe it or not. All right. This is a good place to stop for the second video. So that's what I'm going to do. It's about 30 minutes. So we're going to stop, and I will see you again in the third video.